Hello everyone and welcome to another video. We have talked before about the hardest scenarios in RollerCoaster Tycoon, but what about the easiest? Which of the 160 scenarios in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 and 2 are so easy that even a baby panda could complete them? There isn't one singular definitive answer to this, which means that it's a perfect topic for a video, as we can, as we often do, look at it from a variety of angles and see which scenarios come out on top. The very first scenario in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 is Forest Frontiers, and this one is super easy for a variety of reasons. Firstly, you only need 250 guests, in addition to a park rating of 600, making it by far the lowest guest goal in the entire game, as the second lowest is Leafy Lake with exactly double that. The park is entirely flat, almost entirely empty and pretty big for just 250 guests. The loan goes up to a maximum of 30,000 euros, which is quite decent, and the guests aren't poor either, with between 60 and 90 euros each. But the main thing is, 250 guests just isn't very much. To show how little it is, I built 3 flat rides, 1 pre-built steel mini coaster that comes with the game, and 3 stalls, all connected to the same straight bit of path. Then I hired 1 handyman and 1 mechanic and just let the park run. Even with just this, I already got to the required 250 guests with a good enough park rating before the end of May year 1, which isn't even halfway to the deadline of October year 1. Of course, you can still fill Forest Frontiers, it's not a complete freebie, but it's a very good and simple starting scenario. However, the time you have to get there is also quite short, as you only have a single year to get to 250 guests. There are actually a couple of scenarios that require fewer guests per year. In fact, the very next scenario is like that, with Dynamite Dunes requiring 650 guests in 3 years, which is an average of just 217 per year. That of course doesn't make it easier necessarily, as managing a larger park comes with more difficulties. This is easily proven by looking at Evergreen Gardens, which has a goal of 1000 guests in 4 years, or 250 per year, just like in Forest Frontiers. Despite that, it is regarded as quite a difficult scenario, and I actually saw a great example of why that is very recently. Someone asked for some gameplay tips because she couldn't beat Evergreen Gardens as she had ran out of money. It turns out that despite having 13 rides, she only charged $6 for the park entrance, while she could probably have charged 10 times that. In my Forest Frontiers example, I didn't even have to increase the loan to build what was necessary, let alone worry about actually making money. But with a larger and longer park like Evergreen Gardens, suddenly you do need to make money, and developing that skill suddenly becomes necessary. Wacky Waikiki from the RCT2 Wacky Worlds expansion needs 1100 guests in 5 years, on average of 220 a year, very similar to Dynamite Dunes 217. There's all sorts of other reasons that make this a harder scenario, but technically you do need fewer guests per year than in Forest Frontiers. You can get all the guests within just 1 year though, but even then this scenario is not easy, as then you need the patience to wait another 4 goddamn years before you finally complete it and can move on, and that is a skill that few in this world possess. Leafy Lake and the Taiwan exclusive Taiwan Park go even lower, with 500 guests in 3 years, just 167 per year, and Leafy Lake comes real close to being as easy as Forest Frontiers. There is quite a lot of open space with the water, which is slightly more expensive to build on, but the difference isn't that big, so you can easily build a lot. But most importantly, your loan goes all the way up to 50,000 euros, 20,000 more than Forest Frontiers. There's also already a nice circular path, which is great for pathfinding and makes it less likely for people to create bad layouts. Just for the sake of sheer simplicity, Forest Frontiers is probably easier and thus the easiest guest goal scenario, but Leafy Lake isn't far behind. Actually, we're not quite done with guest goals yet. RCT1 comes with 3 real parks, and one of them is Heide Park. The guest goal of 2,500 guests in 3 years seems very high, but you start with a nice 2,069 guests already in the park. That means you only need to get another 431 extra, which is just 144 per year, less than Leafy Lake. Alton Towers is even more extreme, with the same goal of 2,500 guests, but 2,256 guests already in the park, meaning you just need to get 81.3 guests per year. It's not an easy scenario though, as there's a lot of financial pressure from a very high loan, but Alton Towers is the scenario that needs the fewest amount of new guests per year. But Heide Park can do something that no other scenario reasonably can do, which is beat itself. A few years ago I opened Hyde Park and just let it run, again and again and again and again, until eventually I got lucky enough that the guest count had increased to 2500 with also the required 600 park rating by the end of year 3. It took me probably about 100 attempts, but eventually it succeeded and it beat itself. Theoretically, Alton Towers, and probably a few others as well, can do this too, but in the few dozen attempts I did of Alton Towers, I never got even remotely close to 2500 guests, while in Hyde Park I regularly got over that goal only to lose guests again later, so the chance in Alton Towers is way smaller, leaving Hyde Park as the only scenario that can feasibly be beaten without doing anything. There is more to RollerCoaster Tycoon than just guest goals though, and another common goal type is needing a certain amount of park value. The very first of these is Diamond Height, which is quite easy because the goal is fairly low and you start with a decent park already there. In the original RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 you need 20,000 park value and the park you start with already has 13,300. RST2 calculates park value differently and you start with 120,000 instead, with the goal being adjusted to 200,000 in Open RST2 and 300,000 in RST Classic. The deadline is always after 3 years and there is plenty of space to build stuff, making Diamond Heights fairly easy. However, I would wager that Crater Carnage from the RST2 Time Twister expansion is easier. There is no park here yet, but you only need to get 100,000 value in 2 years and you also start with a lot of destroyable scenery. I don't know about you, but as a kid I always just deleted everything here, including the crystals on the hillside, which gives an absolute ton of money. And then all you need is a few pre-built coasters and some flat rides and you're well past the 100,000 park value. The problem with park value scenarios is that rides lose their value over time. First after 5 months and then again when they turn 13 months old. After the first drop, this park still has just over the required 100,000 park value, but the second age penalty makes it go below that, so you need to build more stuff. This can be hard to keep up with, especially if you're not great with making money, so even the easiest park value goal is still a fair bit trickier than Forest Frontiers is. Except maybe one of them if you know the secret. Six Flags Magic Mountain has a goal of getting 700,000 park value and repaying the loan. There is no deadline involved here, but 700,000 park value is a lot, so it's by no means easy. Except that you start with over 800,000 park value, more than 100k past the goal. The challenge is of course the other part, paying back the 50,000 euro loan. But if you delete the Twister Coaster Flashback and the Hyper Twister Goliath, then you will get exactly enough money to pay back the loan while still staying above the park value requirement as well, allowing you to beat it pretty much instantly. Because it's so quick, Six Flags Magic Mountain has the shortest speedrun in OpenRST2, which is 1.56 seconds. Here it is. And there it went. Once you're past this initial window and the rides have lost some value, this scenario is not easy at all, but if you know the magic, you'll break no sweat. Just like Crater Carnage is the easiest park value scenario, the RST2 expansions also gave us the easiest ride profit scenario. There are a couple of these and the goal ranges from 5,000 euros of ride ticket profit in a single month to 10,000 euros, except for Sherwood Forest, which has a goal of just 1,000 euros. This is really not much at all, and with just these two pre-built coasters added, I eventually beat it. And that's with keeping the coaster ticket prices at their very low default 2 euros. If you don't do that, then you can beat this scenario in just 3 clicks, which is the fewest of any scenario in the game outside of a very lucky Hyde Park. Click on the Junior, click on the Money tab, and then click on the Increase Price button until it has reached 10 euros. Then just wait, and most of the time you will beat the scenario, often already in the very first month. I think this scenario is probably easier than Forest Frontiers. Not only is the goal super easy, but there's also a park already going. There are different rides for different intensity preferences, there's a food stall, a drink stall and a toilet, and there are 2 handymen and 2 mechanics to keep it going. This park will function fine for a very long time if you just don't do anything. And you can take that very long time because there's not even a deadline. I have seen people fail Forest Frontiers because they took too long to plan out their park and they forgot about the deadline, but that cannot happen here. Not only is the park immediately ready to receive more rides, but you also cannot forget about the deadline because it doesn't exist. The only way you can fail these kinds of parks without a deadline is by going deep into debt. In Sherwood Forest that is quite unlikely, because as soon as you build like one extra coaster or increase the ticket price of the existing one just a little bit, the park already turns a profit. But in other scenarios that is more difficult. Gravity Gardens is a good example of that. In theory you cannot lose this scenario as there is no deadline, but 500,000 park value is a lot and a lot of people get stuck before that and no longer make any money. And then, while they don't technically fail the scenario, they also can't beat it anymore as their debt continues to accumulate. One solution to this problem is scenarios that don't have money enabled. Extreme Heights, for example, has money disabled entirely and thus you cannot go into debt in any way, shape or form. The downside is that you are not allowed to ever let your park rating drop below 700 or you lose and your park gets closed permanently. This is made easier by the fact that you can hire however many staff you like as money doesn't exist, but it's still not easy. I remember that about 14 years ago it took me roughly 15 in-game years to get to the required 4,500 guests to beat it. An easier one is the Great Wall of China, which requires just 800 guests, meaning you're far less likely to run into things like pathfinding issues, but ultimately you can still lose. What we need is a scenario with no money, no deadline and also not that freaky 700 park rating restriction. Introducing RollerCoaster Heaven, a park that is literally impossible to lose. The goal is to build 10 roller coasters of different types that each have at least 7 excitement and are at least 1000 meters long. That is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but you have infinite time and you cannot ever lose or even get into trouble. You can make your park as bad as you like and trap 5,000 guests forever or something, but it all doesn't matter in the slightest. Almost every time that I've played this scenario I just did some nonsense like this where none of the coasters are even properly connected to the path and beat it anyway. However, all the big redwood trees are a lot harder to remove in the original game as you have to remove them one by one, since there the scenery removal tool cannot remove large scenery. And since there are not 10 pre-built designs available that are long enough, you will have to design a 1000 meter 7 excitement coaster yourself, which is not a simple thing to do. There is one scenario that is easier in every single way though, and that is Alcatraz Prison Island. Again, you've got no money and a coaster building goal, except this time there is no length requirement and you only need 6 excitement instead of 7, which is a very significant difference. If you're actually trying to build a proper park here, then you are up for somewhat of a challenge as the pathing that exists in this park is genuinely god-awful, but you don't need to do that. You can just spam 10 pre-built coaster designs that come with the game that you can easily build on the water or on the land, there's plenty of space, and win the scenario. There is no possible way to lose, you don't need to make space for anything and you don't even need to design your own rides. That makes this scenario definitely a candidate for the easiest scenario in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 and 2. So, the results. Which is actually the easiest? We have seen a bunch of candidates, namely Forest Frontiers, Sherwood Forest, Prison Island, Six Flags Magic Mountain and Hyde Park. That last one I will immediately cross off the list, as it requires a ton of luck to beat it without doing anything, which is feasible for a challenge run but unreasonable for regular play. I also don't like Six Flags Magic Mountain here, as it requires a very specific trick. The same goes for Bumbly Bazaar and its €1000 shop and stall profit goal. You can very easily beat it if you make umbrellas $20 and build one coaster, or even without a coaster if you're lucky, but again that's a very specific trick that new players probably won't know. That leaves Forest Frontiers with its super easy 250 guest goal, Sherwood Forest and its very quick €1000 ride ticket profit goal, and the unlosable build 10 coasters goal of the moneyless Prison Island. In third place I put Prison Island, as a lot of people, including me as a kid, will try to build an actual park in it, and then you put a lot of focus on making that work. And if you are trying to build your own custom coaster designs, then that too can be a bit of a challenge. In second place is Forest Frontiers, which is super easy but also has a deadline that you reach after less than an hour of gameplay, which can be a bit quick if you're playing for the very first time. That leaves Sherwood Forest as the easiest scenario of all. The goal requirements are super low, there's already a solid park running and there is no deadline in the way. Coincidentally, this is also my favorite scenario of both games combined. But there are a few more scenarios that we need to talk about, which are the ones without a strictly beatable goal. RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 released 11 competition scenarios, where all you need to do is build the best of a certain ride type that you can. That means that as long as you have built something and you think it's the best you can do, you have fulfilled the goal requirements. But these are no match for Mega Park and RCT Classic's Tycoon Park, where you don't need to do anything other than have fun, making these the true easiest scenarios in the game. To see whether it's possible to beat all of these scenarios without any guests ever riding any ride, click right here. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.